Every December they said the same thing about him. That man has money, but no heart. He never donated publicly. Never showed up at charity dinners. Never smiled for cameras during Christmas drives. People called him cold, selfish, a hoarder of wealth. On Christmas morning the city woke up and realized how wrong they had been. His name was Edwin Cole. He lived in a quiet house at the edge of the city, a simple two-story home with gray shutters and weathered brick. The paint was peeling slightly around the windows. The garden, once vibrant, had been left to grow wild with weeds threading through the flower beds. No decorations adorned his porch. No Christmas lights outlined his roof. No visitors ever knocked on his door. While others celebrated loudly, stringing lights across entire neighborhoods and filling their windows with glowing trees, Edwin moved silently through his days. He was a shadow in a season of light. Every morning he walked the same route through the city. Down Maple Street. Past the coffee shop where families gathered. Through the square where carolers sang. He passed the same people begging for change on the corner of 5th and Main. The woman with the torn coat. The veteran holding a cardboard sign. The young mother with 2 children clinging to her legs. And Edwin never stopped. He would glance their way, just briefly, then continue walking, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his long wool coat, his face expressionless beneath the brim of his hat. Unaware of what lay beneath that silence, people believed he didn't care. They watched him pass and shook their heads. They whispered to one another. They judged. Edwin Cole was known as one of the wealthiest men in the region. His companies employed thousands, manufacturing plants, distribution centers, technology firms that stretched across 3 states. His investments shaped entire industries. Financial magazines had profiled him. Business students studied his strategies. Yet every December, when the season of giving arrived, Edwin became invisible. He declined every public donation request. Refused interviews with local news stations covering holiday charity drives. Ignored invitations to fundraising galas where other wealthy donors would gather in tuxedos and gowns, writing checks with photographers ready to capture their generosity. The city's philanthropic community grew to resent him. He could change so many lives, one nonprofit director said bitterly at a planning meeting. Imagine what we could do with even a fraction of his wealth, another added. Someone once wrote in the local newspaper's opinion section, "If greed had a face, it would be Edwin Cole's. In a season of joy and generosity, he stands as a monument to selfishness." The article was shared hundreds of times online. People commented with their own stories of seeing him pass by those in need. The resentment grew year after year, until his name became synonymous with cold indifference. Edwin heard it all. He saw the articles, read the comments, felt the stares when he walked through town. He never responded, never defended himself, never explained. On Christmas Eve, as snow began to fall softly outside, Edwin sat alone in his living room. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. There was no Christmas tree standing in the window. No stockings hung above the fireplace. No music playing softly in the background. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, that presses against your chest and makes every breath deliberate. Edwin sat in his worn leather chair, the same chair he had sat in for 20 years, and stared at the small wooden box on the table before him. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were fragments of another life. A photograph of a woman with dark hair and a radiant smile, standing beside a Christmas tree decorated with handmade ornaments. She wore a red sweater and her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that seems impossible to extinguish. Another photo showed 2 children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5, holding gifts wrapped in newspaper because money had been tight that year, but their faces glowed with pure happiness. A third photo captured a younger Edwin, his arm around his wife, both of them laughing at something one of the children had said. His face was different then, open, warm, alive. At the bottom of the box lay a small angel ornament, hand-painted by his daughter, with uneven wings and a crooked halo that made it perfect. Edwin picked it up carefully as if it might crumble in his hands. 20 years ago, on a night much like this one, His wife Catherine had been driving home with the children after visiting her mother. The roads were icy. A truck driver, exhausted from too many hours on the road, crossed the median. The accident happened instantly. By the time Edwin reached the hospital, they were gone, all three of them taken in a moment that felt too cruel to be real. Christmas never recovered for him. The decorations came down that year and never went back up. The music stopped playing. The joy vanished, leaving only this vast, echoing emptiness. People didn't understand why he withdrew. They didn't know why he walked past the needy without stopping. They couldn't see that every face reminded him of what he had lost. The family he could no longer help, no matter how much money he had. What the city didn't know, what they couldn't have known because Edwin never spoke of it, was this. For 10 years, since the pain had dulled enough for him to breathe again, Edwin had been giving. Not publicly. Not with announcements or press releases. Not with his name attached to buildings or programs. Quietly. Anonymously. Consistently. He funded hospital bills for families who couldn't afford treatment, working through a lawyer who never revealed his identity. He paid the heating bills for entire apartment buildings in the poorest neighborhoods every winter, ensuring that no child would shiver through Christmas night. He established scholarships for students who had lost parents, children who understood his grief, giving them the education his own children would never receive. He bought the building that housed the homeless shelter and forgave their rent permanently. He sent monthly checks to families struggling with debt, always unsigned, always accompanied by the same typed note. From someone who remembers. The woman with the torn coat on 5th and Main? Her rent had been paid for 3 years by an anonymous donor. The veteran with the cardboard sign? He had received a fully furnished apartment and job training, funded by a trust he never knew Edwin had created. The young mother with 2 children? Her medical bills had been cleared, and a college fund had been established for both her kids. Edwin gave millions, silently, steadily, year after year. Not because he wanted recognition. Not to ease his conscience or build a legacy. But because in helping others survive their darkest seasons, he found a way to survive his own. Every gift was signed with those same 4 words, typed on plain paper. From someone who remembers. On Christmas morning, as dawn broke over the city and families gathered around their trees, something strange began to happen. Mrs. Henderson, a widow living on a fixed income, opened her mailbox to find an envelope containing a check that would cover her property taxes for 5 years. The Children's Hospital received notification that $2 million in patient debt had been cleared overnight, hundreds of families suddenly freed from financial ruin. 3 homeless shelters found keys in their mailboxes, each attached to a deed for a new building fully paid for and winterized. Families across the poorest neighborhoods opened their doors to find envelopes containing cash. Not a fortune, but enough to buy presents, to put food on the table, to breathe a little easier. The city buzzed with confusion. Who did this? Where did it come from? Why today? Local news stations scrambled to cover the story. Social media exploded with speculation. Everyone wanted to know the identity of this mysterious benefactor. Then, at exactly 9 a.m., an email arrived in the inbox of every major news outlet in the city. It contained a single letter. And permission to share it publicly. The letter read, "To those who have wondered, I never gave publicly because my love never needed witnesses. 20 years ago, Christmas took everything from me, my wife Catherine, my son Michael, my daughter Sarah. They died on a snowy road on their way home to the life we had built together. For years I couldn't bear this season. Every decoration was a reminder. Every carol was a knife. Every smiling family was a ghost of what I had lost. But grief, I learned, is not the opposite of love. It's love with no place to go. So I found a place for it. Every year since I've been able, I've given quietly, to families who needed hope, to children who needed care, to people the world had forgotten. Not for recognition. Not for tax benefits. Not to build a legacy. But because Christmas took everything from me once, and I've spent every year since trying to make sure it gives someone else hope. I share this now only because I'm dying and I wanted you to know. The people you ignore might be carrying more than you know. The generosity you don't see might be the kind that matters most. And sometimes the quietest people carry the deepest love. I hope this season brings you not just gifts but understanding. Edwin Cole. Within an hour, the letter had been shared 10,000 times. By afternoon, it was national news. Silence fell across the city like snow. The same people who had mocked Edwin Cole stood motionless in their kitchens, their living rooms, their churches, reading his words on their phones and feeling something crack inside their chests. They remembered every insult they had muttered as he walked past, every judgment they had made about his character, every assumption they had built about his heart. The newspaper editor who had published the scathing opinion piece sat at his desk, staring at the screen, unable to move. The nonprofit directors who had cursed his name at planning meetings felt their faces burn with shame. The strangers who had called him heartless realized they had been standing on ground he had paid for, living in warmth he'd provided, breathing a little easier because of help he had given. All of it done without a word, without asking for thanks, without needing them to know. The man they had called heartless had been healing the city quietly for years, and they had spent those same years condemning him for it. That Christmas, something changed in the city. People didn't decorate louder or throw bigger parties. Instead, they spoke softer. They judged less. They looked closer at the people they passed on the street. Edwin Cole died 3 days after Christmas, quietly, in the same house where he had spent 20 years alone with his grief and his purpose. His funeral was attended by thousands, people he had never met but whose lives he had changed. They came not because they had known him but because they finally understood him. The city erected a small memorial in the square where he used to walk. It bore a simple inscription: Edwin Cole, who gave without needing to be seen, and loved without needing to be thanked. Because they learned something important that Christmas. Not all generosity is loud. Not all kindness is visible. And sometimes the quietest people carry the deepest love. The greatest gifts are often given in silence, by people the world has misjudged, who transform lives without ever asking for applause. If this story reminded you to judge less and understand more, stay with us. And if you believe kindness doesn't need applause, subscribe. These stories are for you.